and welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be getting into plotting um, for your story, for your fiction story. I'm going to confess that I actually don't plot in my books. I don't do any plotting, or I should say, maybe my plotting style is a little bit different. Um, just to give you some background on how I started writing, I began writing in middle school through a friend. Shout out to Valerie, who encouraged me to write. And she was writing in like just, spiral notebooks. And I decided, I'm like, I was against it, of course. I She broke me down pretty quickly, actually. And I started writing. And for me, how I've written all of my books is it's basically, I call it the spark. There's always a spark that inspires me for the story. So it could be just a simple scene that played, not simple, but a scene that plays out in my mind's eye, or sometimes something in the song triggers something. Sometimes it's a line or a quotation that I envisioned, or just sometimes it's from a dream. A lot of times I'll have dreams of certain things, characters in my book. That's what I call the spark for me. So there's this spark. And in that spark, I come up with this whole concept that a story kind of wraps itself around that concept or that idea. So, using the example of my book, we talked about endurance a lot. So, let's talk about Forbidden. My book, Forbidden, I actually got that spark shortly after I completed, I think, my third book, which was Spirit. Um, and in that, the first scene that came into my mind was of Dakota discovering this woman who was buried uh, in the woods by his cave, by his tribe's cave. And just him uncovering her, like that situation, how he feels and everything. So that was the first thing that I envisioned. And I wrote that scene out. I think I wrote the first chapter. In the beginning of the chapter, it started out with that scene. That's how the chapter originally started. It started out with that scene where he's unburying her from the ground. Years later, lots of rewrites later, it is what it is today, which it's just the opening scene has changed, but that scene is still in the first chapter. So you can sit there's I guess the traditional way to do your plot is like building an outline for your book. So you're going to have almost like a timeline. So you can make kind of like a timeline, or you can create, like, like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, like certain things that you want to happen in that chapter. And those are all good. This has been my experience. A reason why I haven't outlined, reason why I don't really do plotting in that way is because for me it changes. And I kid you not, if I plan it out to go a certain way, it completely goes in the opposite direction, or it doesn't go the same way. And I don't know why that is, but I'm also the type of person where I like the characters to tell the story. I like the story to tell itself. I don't want to dictate the story. I want the story to naturally tell itself. So, and that's what I find makes it unique, because then there's these natural plot twists and turns that I don't have to force or create. They come naturally. And I'm just as shocked as a reader when they're like, "Oh, wow, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see that coming either." And I'm writing it. So this is why I don't uh, believe in doing an outline for your book. What I believe in doing is taking that time, taking that day to sit down and soul search your story. So, whatever it is, whatever that comes to you, if you relax your mind, just relax and allow the story to come to you and start jotting it down. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't worry about grammar. Don't worry about any of that stuff. This is between you and your eyeballs. Okay, you and your spirit. You're going to write down whatever it is that you're envisioning, whatever it is that you're seeing, and you're going to allow the story to write itself. This is what I like to teach my students. So don't get caught up in trying to have the story go in a certain direction when it starts to go in a different direction, because again, that is like fighting against your fingerprint. And if you had listened to my previous videos before where I spoke about the fingerprint, your fingerprint is basically, if we were all to sit down and write the story of Cinderella, each of our versions will be different. And we could write the same outline. We're writing this from the same outline, but our perceptions are all different and our style is different. That's your fingerprint. See, you can't, as much as you want to try to fight your fingerprint, you can't. Your male characters are always going to be a certain way. Your female characters are always going to be a certain way. This is like for your female, what do you call it? The female heroes, and saying, and the villains. They're all going to be a certain way, male and female. They're all going to be a certain way. That is a part of your fingerprint. Your scenes, your settings, your backgrounds, just how you visualize your story. It's a part of what makes up your fingerprint, and it's what people will say. Oh, I want to read her book or his book, today because I'm in that mood. I want to be in that world. You understand? Like you're creating something unique that's gonna be the reason why your readers choose your book over someone else's at that time. It doesn't mean that they won't go back to. There's so many books and there's so many people. Don't ever think that there's not enough. There's too many books or the market's flooded. It really isn't, because uh, people read tons of books all the time. This is why there's libraries. People have personal libraries. So don't get into the hype that, a market is saturated. That market has never been saturated. No matter what they're trying to do to the market, they can't saturate that market. People are always looking for the next good book, and not just one, maybe 10 or 20. So anyway, plotting is good for people who, I would suggest plotting for people who are very detail oriented and they must have structure, and they're more on a logical mind frame. I'll also say plotting is good for nonfiction books. Nonfiction books, definitely you need to plot because it's a certain series of events that you're following. So that's completely different. The type of plotting I'm talking about right now is for fiction authors, and that is where you basically you to prevent your mind from writer's block. Writer's block is just stress, and sometimes you get writer's block because you're trying to force the story in a different direction that it doesn't want to go. Okay, always keep that in mind with writer's block. So what happens? Your inner writer starts to shut down. Okay, so what you want to do is stop and let go. Just let the story tell itself. Stop trying to control it. And the amazing thing with that is you're going to come out with such an amazing and unique story. And I'm not going to say it's going to be absolutely perfect. This is where the developmental editing kicks in, and the revamps and the going over and over and again for editing and structural. You do all those things. You work out all those kinks. But I really don't believe in plotting unless you're writing nonfiction. That's my personal opinion. You don't have to take my advice. Um, there's I've tried it. I've tried it because remember I was never traditionally trained on how to write books. So I was basically, I want to say it's just like my soul just started writing. And I literally just I for so now when I start a book, how I start a book is I start at chapter 1. I literally write chapter 1. I may or may not have a title, and I may or may not even enjoy that title, but I say like, chapter 1, and I'll start writing it out. And I'll go through that whole book. I'll just write the whole book out. Maybe when I revisit, I might change things, whatever. And then I just go over and I just keep going over it and over it and over again. So for me, It's like at first you lay down the skeleton, and then you put in the veins and the tissue and the muscles and the tendons and all that fun stuff, you know? So I don't stick to a traditional way of looking at it, but I guess in a way it's kind of similar. You're still doing an outline, but you're not being uh constrained to that outline that you created, because things can change. So I would even go as far as to say take out a recorder and just record yourself telling the story. Record yourself telling the story. Don't write it down. And take a break, come back, listen to it, see if you like how the story sounds, see if you want to add to it, things like that. Just start it that way first to see how you get to feel it. Then sit down and start writing your story. But the reason why this method is really good, especially for fiction writing, is because when you're doing creative writing, you need freedom. Creativity loves freedom. It loves freedom. So if you're putting it in a box, if you're putting it in something that does not allow freedom to be more creative, you're gonna run into walls a lot. You're gonna, and then, or even if you force your way through, you're gonna have a story that could have been 10 million times better. So just keep that in mind. I hope you enjoyed our plot talk conversation, and I look forward to sharing my years of knowledge on writing and creating books and the self publishing industry. Take care for now, and happy writing.